I really believe this. This planet was here before I was here or any of you or anyone else that's ever lived on it or will live on it, at least in the future that I see. But we need Earth. Earth does not need us. Earth was actually perfect at one point in time. What's happened? Well, man's involvement has affected the planet. And it's really affected it in the last 80 years, or 81 years now. We use a point in time, World War II, but we basically went into agriculture changed dramatically after World War II. And literally, honestly, weapons of mass destruction, which were used in wars like World War II, and some of the roots of what was mentioned earlier, like anhydrous ammonia. Anhydrous ammonia was invented by two German scientists in 1905, Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch. And the Haber-Bosch process in 1905 was the synthesis of ammonia, first time ever, from air with a piece of uranium in a box under pressure. This is 1905. The Germans weren't interested in growing plants. They needed nitric acid to be able to build bombs. And the reason was that Chile, where they were getting bat guano to make nitric acid, was basically blockaded by Britain. So the supply of the bat guano was cut off from Germany. And that's why we today have had anhydrous ammonia, which is the basis of all nitrogen fertilizer, synthetic man-made fertilizer, and that's the way it's been since 1905. But it really didn't come into prominence until mentioned earlier that the runways Ron mentioned, you can build a runway out of our soil with enough anhydrous ammonia. And it does that because basically, what does anhydrous mean? Anhydrous means without water. So the anhydrous ammonia immediately sucks in all the moisture it can find, all the biologicals in the soil perish for a bit of time. And so it has an effect. Yes, it's bringing us nitrogen, but I've always said, when you compare the price of nitrogen, and we're all concerned about input cost, and you always should be, but the reality is what you paid the co-op for the anhydrous is not the final cost. You have a soil health cost. Now, how to quantify that is a whole different issue, but that's what we're here about, and that's why we're all working together with Andy, Nate, Ron, others. We're all in this together with Jeremy and Andrew to help bring solutions. We're after solutions. We all know what the problems are, but our challenge is to bring solutions. This is one of the best testaments I've found. This book is basically about the world in 1 cubic foot. You take this cubic foot of, could be PVC pipe, iron pipe, whatever, but the point is that we can go out in nature with this little structure, and the person who wrote this book, David Lynchburger, he actually went out in different places in the world, even into the ocean, and filmed for 72 hours what went through or was in that cubic foot of space. To give you an idea, out in nature, that actually happened to be in South Africa. Look at the diversity of the magnitude of what was in and around through that cubic foot in 72 hours. He also did it in an Iowa cornfield. That's what was in and went through that in 72 hours. I think we could say that looks a lot different than this. Now, how can we go from there? Yes, we're monocropping. We're trying to grow one thing in our farm, typically, and here either field corn or soybeans, and we need that. But is it become so efficient that we've literally totally destroyed everything else in the quest to try to grow one thing for food for man? I've never subscribed to the thought that we can destroy everything else just to do one thing. This one sometimes hurts. People say ouch when they read it, but the reality is, since World War II with synthetics, we farmed with the sides. And CIDE in Webster's means death. And we know it more commonly as homicide or genocide or suicide, but The reality is we're farming with fungicides, bacticides, herbicides, insecticides. So it's the same thing. It's the same outcome, death. Not saying that we can do it otherwise, but there are side effects. And that's the whole point. We know we need our agronomic inputs. We need the man-made inputs. But do we need as much as we've been doing? And did we go past a point of diminishing returns? I'm convinced, and I think we all are now, that that is the truth. We went too far with the man-made, and it's now cost us soil health. So here we are today. We've got to get focused on getting soil health back. We're still going to use the other inputs. I'm not saying we're going to cut those out, because nobody in this room, any of us, could cut out everything else and go back to the way it was prior to World War II. As Andy showed us, and he's done this for a lot of years, and he's very proficient in it, biology, soil biology, and that's what his expertise is. He's a biochemist. He's young, but he is far beyond his years. I'll promise you that. I've known him for 5 years now. So I'm connecting the dots. What I'm bringing you now is a way that we can start to incorporate different tools into your toolbox, things that are more focused on soil health instead of just agronomic inputs. This is the big three. I was told my first 20 years of farming that the big three were N, P, and K. That's not true. In the real scheme of things, in the natural world, the big three are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in different forms: water, sugar, carbohydrates, CO2, oxygen, O2. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are the big three. And that's why I formed CarbonWorks, was to deliver carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, because that is what's necessary for life. That's why all of us are in this room right now, why I'm standing here sharing with you. It's about the balance of all those things. That's something that we don't think about, and we don't need to think about in everyday farming or everyday life, but the reality is what you and I are breathing right now, mostly in the air, is nitrogen. And Andy alluded to that with amino acids and proteins, why that's important. Because nitrogen is necessary to build amino acids and proteins. That's the way it works in nature. Nobody's fertilizing the forest. How does that work? The other part's 21% oxygen. So 78 and 21 is still 99. So 99% of what we're breathing right now is nitrogen and oxygen. And oh, they lose their minds when you go down here and you get into the smaller gases right here, 1%. Okay. And they were talking about building a pipeline through your state, your beautiful state. They're going to build this big pipeline, and they're going to ship CO2 out of the air and ship it to North Dakota and pipe it down into the center of the earth. Now, you talk about something absurd. That is absurd. And I'll tell anybody in the state of Iowa that to their face. That is a joke. It's a scam. And it was a money scam, and they stole a lot of our tax money. And it doesn't make me very happy, and I know it doesn't make a lot of you happy either. But that's reality. The CO2 in the atmosphere is actually 0.04 of 1%, 0.04. It's a minuscule amount, but all plant life lives off of that CO2. And so Andy and I have been working on what he put up on his graphic is the layers of how the atmosphere is layered by molecular weights. And that is why CO2 tends to be lower, O2 is higher. When you start looking at the weights of carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, it happens to be 12, 14, and 16. So you start looking at the compounds in the atmosphere and you learn that it's in layers. And oh, guess what? The lightest stuff of all, hydrogen, a 1, is way up there, to space, to the sun. That's hydrogen. Now, how does all this come back together? All of you here know the photosynthetic equation. We know we're farming, we're involved in agriculture. How do plants build sugar? You take water, CO2, sunlight energy. Plants build sugar, which is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Very purposeful. We rarely talk about the bottom portion, respiration. My point is, and the reason I really focus on this, is that the respiration and the photosynthesis are both interdependent. You can't have one without the other. There's no purpose. They have to work together. You have to have the respiration to be able to actually have future photosynthesis, because guess what? As Andy alluded to, the CO2 and the water come from the breakdown in respiration of sugar. The biology are after the food, the sugar. And the books even say that as much as 50% of photosynthetic sugar goes down to the soil biology to feed them. And we've got a very positive synergy there between the above ground plant and the below ground biology, because the sugar then is respirated, and so CO2 and water are the byproducts. Wow, that's just what you need to make more sugar with sunlight energy. So there's a reason, and there's a reason that the stomatas are on the bottom of the leaf, because these guys are breaking it down right at the surface level in the first couple of inches, like Nate alluded to. In the top 3-4 inches of our soil typically are where the biologicals, the aerobics, the ones living in oxygen and need oxygen to live, they break down that sugar and release the CO2 and water. So what I'm getting at is this is a natural process. This is the way it works in nature. We got away from this in my lifetime, and others in this room that are a little bit lighter hair. We've seen a few more rodeos, okay? But since World War II, we've actually seen how far we got away from this, how it really works. What really germinates a seed? Is it the energy and the oxygen that are tied to the nutrients? Nutrients are salts. N, P, and K are salts. All metals are salts. This graphic shows what I first saw with Nate up here, and it actually was on the north side of the state line. I was in Minnesota. But we were at a farmer's, and he showed us a wet paper towel germ test. Now, this is something I'd never seen. This is 2009. And my aha moment was that on this side, there was nothing but water and what? Oxygen. That seed was germinating in a wet paper towel. There's no soil, there's no fertilizer, there's no chemicals. There's nothing but water and oxygen. Now, when we take our in-furrow carbon at that point in time and put it with the water, there's a tremendous difference in the germination of those seeds and acceleration. This is the same exact time lapse. This was in side-by-side comparison with the same soybean seeds. So the point is that we enhance the energy and oxygen, and we tie it to pure carbon. This is our in-furrow product, RSTC17. It's been around. It's been in Minnesota since 2009, 17 years now. It works. I promise you, if it didn't work, we wouldn't be here 17 years later. And these are the kind of numbers that we achieve with just this product. And this is the actual look of the product, the dark carbon. That with water in furrow generated 9 bushels an acre on corn and 4 bushels on soybeans. And this is for 10 plus years in a row. So we have a good track record that worked. Now that's evolved into 2016-17. We had a situation where my dark carbon, the in-furrow product, was mistakenly put in a 1,000-gallon tank of 28% UAN. And the only reason that the worker realized that something was different, he thought he'd put a nitrogen stabilizer in there, but it wasn't. It was my carbon. And he could stick his head in the tank. Now you all know in here, you could not stick your head in the tank of 1,000 gallons of 28% untreated. It would tip you over. The ammonia volatilization would knock you out. But in this case, we were actually doing something that to that point in time had never been done. And that was actually putting carbon in with the UAN, and we stopped the volatilization of the ammonia. So at that point, Nate put that into replicated research in Minnesota, and then we ultimately were put into Beck's Hybrids PFR testing program. And for 3 years, 2019, 2020, 2021, 3 years in a row, positive ROI with cetane added into liquid UAN. And we had a very positive yield response. So what's happening is that the cetane is actually enhancing these guys, the nitrosomonas and nitrobacter. Because what's happening? You've got to convert NH3 ammonia to NH4. You got to get it into ammonium. You have to find a hydrogen. That's why you always wanted to go out with your urea with moisture. Already had a rain, or right after rain, or right before rain. You needed moisture to convert your urea. Get it into ammonium. Then, once it's in ammonium, the nitrosomonas adds oxygen to get it to nitrite, NO2, and then nitrobacter adds another oxygen to get it to NO3, plant available. That is where my carbon comes in. And we actually, instead of keeping it as the Infuro RSTC17, I chose to name it cetane for carbon stabilization of nitrogen. And we registered that in Minnesota, and off we went. That's 9 years ago. So the bottom line is that there are other products, the bacticides, the urease inhibitors, ammonium thiosulfate. They all do things, but they can't do what cetane does. We actually hold all three forms, and that's what's going to add to your bottom line. It's actually going to make more nitrogen available, which is going to add to yield. But we do that in a very cost-effective manner. As you can see, when we put it on urea, 10 bushels on corn, and a 7 average on UAN. This is multiple years. This is so proven that people ask me, say, well, we want to try it on our farm. You want to donate some product? And I said, no, I do not. Honestly, I don't want any more trials. I don't need any more trials. I know it works. We don't need to keep beating a dead horse to death, is what my mama said. It works, so use it. And that's why cetane is very, very positive. Now, we've got a break here, Jeremy. I want to show the cetane. They've got the bottles. We have the little small bottles. If you would, and I'll show you what we'd like to do, is if you'll take your bottle of UAN and around your table, take a whiff, smell the ammonia real quick. Okay, you smelled the ammonia. Take the little bottle, and actually that's the cetane, and you can see how microscopic that is compared to the amount of UAN. And if you'll pour that in, and then we can just put the cap back on, the UAN mixture with cetane. That is totally, perfectly homogeneous. Okay, so now take the cap off, and here's the smell test. See if you smell any ammonia volatilizing now. I don't think you are. And nobody's done it in 9 years either. We have stopped the volatilization of that ammonia with pure carbon. But the important part of this is not only that, I just made you money in your UAN by stopping the volatilization of the ammonia. But the added bonus is that those guys that I was showing earlier, the nitrosomonas and nitrobacter, they need oxygen and energy. It's in there now. It's in your UAN. So I've added energy and oxygen that when you put that out on your farm, you've now enhanced that total conversion. So at the end of the day, you're winding up with more of the UAN and a more potent UAN that's actually got more nitrogen plant available, and that turns into yield. And we do that very cost effectively. So that is the smell test, and I think that is self-evident that we definitely changed that UAN. That leads into my other carbon product, is Replenish. This is a clear carbon. This is a pH of 1, very close to battery acid. I won't do that with battery acid, what I'm going to show you, but I'll take this Replenish, wash my face in it. It's not burning me. My technology encapsulates the energy into carbon, and it doesn't have a salt. I will not do that with sulfuric acid because sulfuric acid would burn me. It's not because of the energy, it's because of the salt. So I've got something here that's way different. And we've had this out here the whole time that I've known Nate for 17 years. That product is used most effectively to treat your spray tank water. We need to lower the pH, much like what Ron had on his slide. You've got to get the pH down below 7. There's tons of university research that shows that you lose that half-life. That's what Ron's chart showed. When you're an 8 and 9 pH, you're going to lose that chemical mode of action you're putting in the tank can lose 50 to 75% of its effectiveness in your tank. It'll never make it to the field. So you're paying high dollars for something, especially fungicides, that are never going to do anything in the field because you basically neutralized it with your spray water. So we're about, and the only thing that I ask with the replenish is that you put my replenish in your spray tank first. Replenish is used for your spray tanks. Treat your water. We have a formula. The way we do that, we take an 8-ounce cup of your water at your farm, and Jeremy and Andrew have the meter to go out and test your water. And then we figure the number of drops of replenish it takes to drop the pH of your water. What we're looking for is typically a 5.2 to 5.5 on the pH before you put any mode of action in the tank. Jeremy and I went all over Iowa for 5+ years testing water. Rural water, city water, well water, whatever water we can get. And it takes about 12 to 16 ounces of the replenish per 100 gallons of water. It will be the most cost-effective thing you've ever put in a spray tank. We're talking about something around $1 an acre to use to make your spray water a better carrier for whatever you're putting in the spray tank. One of the reasons that the replenish works better than other so-called adjuvants, stickers, surfactants. I'm not claiming that I'm any of those. I am a water conditioner that's based on pure carbon instead of salt. To give you an idea with the meter, this is a comparative look between the pH of my carbon versus what might be called a competitor. A pH of 1.16, 12.57. That is an international, national brand, large chemical fertilizer company. I won't say their name, but whatever. You can pick any of them. It doesn't matter. Their carbons are high pH. I've never seen a carbon below a pH of 8, what's called a humic acid. There's no such thing. We start with a base carbon too, and if I dissolve our base carbon in water, it'd be a pH of 9. But the more important part is the oxygen. We're a positive 335. That competitor, same competitor product, that's a pH of 12.5, is minus 322 on the oxygen. I think that's self-evident. We're like 600 parts difference, plus 300 something to minus 300 something. This one is not good for aerobic bacteria. And actually, I learned that early on, about 20 years ago, working with potato growers west of the Rockies. They knew that you don't put a humic product that's currently out there, was out there then and out here now 20 years later, you don't put that with seed. It will shut down germination. They figured it out real quick with potato seed, that if you put a raw humate in with seed, it will shut down germination. This is one of my favorite quotes, and actually I came up with this here in Iowa, and I was thinking about manure, because I'd never seen anything like this and never been around farms that had put on 4,000 to 5,000 gallons of hog manure every year for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Too much of a good thing's too much. It could be too much water, too much oxygen, too much carbon, too much salts, too much manure, anything. One of the things that I figured out, and my son knows well, that I always said, I love a gravel road out here in the country, because on a gravel road, it's typically just about 1 lane or 1.5 lane. And so a good neighbor has to kind of slide over and let the other neighbor when you meet someone on a gravel road. But the reality is there's a ditch on the right-hand side, just like on a paved road on the state highway, but there's also the ditch on the left, as close as the one on the right on a gravel road, if you're riding down where you should be. On a paved road, that ditch on the left's a lot further away. So we got more leeway on a paved road, but on a gravel road, you kind of got to stay in the middle of the road. And that's where I'm coming from, is that most things in life we can do if we do it in moderation. It's when we go to extremes, too much or too little of anything, that's when we get in trouble. And it's no different on our farms. So balance is the key to life. We've got the farmer's plaque. Jeremy brought his plaque. The farmer's in your packet. This is called an acrostic. When you can spell a word from other words, and you can see every one of the 7 words there. This appeared to me 7 years ago, standing in a cornfield with Nate Furley in Gibbon, Minnesota. It started out, the first word was recognize, and the second word was share. I cannot tell you how the other words appeared. I have no memory, no recollection of the other words. But they appeared over a little bit of time, a year or more. I had written them down on a piece of paper. These words were important to me. They meant something. You have to recognize everything around you. How are we going to survive if you don't recognize what's happening? It serves you well. The other point was share everything. Now, as I developed the other words, and this is called an acrostic, A-C-R-O-S-T-I-C, when you can spell out a word from other first letter of other words, that's an acrostic. I equate it to like the Scrabble board game we played growing up with the little wooden squares that had letters on them, and we would spell words in Scrabble. Your faith, we're all different. Whatever you believe is what works for you. That may not work for me, and what I believe may not work for you. That's okay. We can all coexist. We should coexist and respect each other's beliefs. But you got to put it in action. Faith without action does nothing. You don't accomplish anything if you don't get moving. You know, the best way to get a job done is get started. The hard part's getting started. And then we get moving, we can kind of get a job done. You recognize, to me, that you and I did not create this planet. It's a gift from God. This is God's planet. We come and go. I know when my son was born, I was there. He didn't bring anything with him in this world. And my parents had both passed, and they didn't take anything material from this world when they left. So what's important, someone once said to me, it's the dash. If you look at a headstone, there's a dash, and it's in between your birth and your passing. What's important in life is the dash. What do you do with your life while you're here? I believe that's what's really important. You find your mission, and you leave this planet better than when you found it. I think that's something we could all subscribe to do a better job of leaving this planet better than we found it. You set an example, and you earn respect. Now, I learned that 47 years ago when I was in the United States Navy, and I was a pilot on aircraft carriers flying all around the world. Now, I'm right out of college and then 2 years of flight training, so I'm still a very young man, 24 years old, and I've got a squadron of mechanics that are working for me now. I'm their boss because I've got the bars. They don't. But you know what? I learned very quickly, those men, I had to earn their respect. I had to show the same type of respect to them that I wanted them to show to me. So you earn respect. And then the last and the most important of all is share. You got to share everything. None of this is really ours. You can show me a deed, you can show me a title to a vehicle, but if you pass, the land's still here and the vehicle's still here. So I think you have temporary ownership while we're here. And that's why it's important to share and help others. Now this one is the Fellowship of Christ-like Growers, and this has evolved with Nate and I and several others have been really working on this for a lot of years to bring forth a platform through Share FCLG where we can share knowledge, agronomic knowledge, we can share life experiences, we can share our faith, we can share our challenges, we can share our opportunities. I'm really passionate about this because I say that the young men are my 30-somethings, okay? I'm twice their age, but they were, when we started this, all in their mid-30s. So here they are. They've got a chance now to take what we as older, wiser men, hopefully in this room, that are willing to share down what, like Steve and I and others have learned, we can share it back down to them at a younger age So they've got a better opportunity to do something with it than maybe we had, because we may have had mentors, but we're trying to be a better mentor to help these young men, not only in their farming, but more importantly in their faith. I'm getting near the end, and this is something that really struck me in 2008. This was from September of 2008. This was the cover of National Geographic, Where Food Begins. This was a 16-page feature article in that issue in September of 2008 that talked about the importance of putting carbon back in the soil. And there's some really astounding statistics in that article. And like, this is now 18 years old, this article, 2008. Food is produced on only 11% of Earth's surface. Of the whole planet, all the land mass on Earth, only 11% produces food, and out of that, only 3% is considered fertile. Now, you here in the Midwest are very blessed, and I know you're very grateful for the organic matter you have in your soil. Now, I'm down there sticking out into salt water, the Atlantic and now the Gulf of America, but I'm on a sandbar that has 0.3 of 1% organic matter and a holding capacity of 5. It's a blessing and a curse. We had to over-apply the nutrients, the salts, but thank goodness in the summer we typically get 50 inches of rain, and we can wash all that salt back out into the Gulf or the Atlantic. That's the only thing that saved us. But we've been farming against the odds with something that had no organic matter and no holding capacity. So this article I found was at the impetus of when I was starting my carbon trek in 2005 is when I started this. So I'm now 21 years into this working with carbon, but it isn't just a base carbon. What CarbonWorks is about, we're bringing energy and oxygen along with the carbon that are tied to the carbon so that we have the big three, the actual big three in nature, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, in a cost-effective product that you can use as a tool in your toolbox. We're not replacing your toolbox. We're just a really good tool to go in your toolbox. To wrap it up, you heard it earlier, this isn't our planet. And I hope that each of you will strive to be a better steward of it. I know we can get a better outcome on our farms if we are. We need to be faithful and we need to be persistent. But this planet will still be here when we pass. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, George.